Okay, everybody, what we're doing today is we're going to take a step back. And this is something you guys really enjoyed doing, which is solving equations. You're pretty good at that. So this is nice to get away from graphing for a little bit. And the reason we're going ahead and going back to solving equations is because we're about to start solving systems of equations. And by that, I mean we're going to be finding the place where two lines cross each other. But you don't have to do that using graphing. You can do that using algebra. And it's actually much, much better to use algebra to do it because of the inaccuracy of graphing. What that means is we're going to be solving the only type of equations we haven't solved yet, which are when you have an x, or any letter, but in this case x, on both sides of the equal sign. Before we do that, though, I want to start doing this now. Is pointing out the notes you guys should have out right now. Okay, so you have 2 pages of notes. This is the notes you should have out in front of you right this second. All right, before we go ahead and jump into something new, I want to make sure you guys remember how to do the older stuff. So we're going to go ahead and go back over one-step equations, two-step equations, and then multi-step equations, 3 or 4-step equations. Making sure that you guys remember how to do all that, because even with variables on both sides, you also have to incorporate combining like terms and distributive property. And just like everything else, you're trying to get the problem to a 2-step equation. So here's the first example, and this one's already on your paper. What you could do is you have two choices. You can go ahead and watch the video, and we'll go ahead and go over the steps if you don't remember how to do it. Or you could pause the video, and then we'll go quickly through the steps after that and make sure you have everything correct. So if you'd like to pause the video and try to do the whole problem on your own, go ahead and do that right now. All right, so what we're going to do is first, if you remember, we drew a line. Okay, and that was a step to keep us organized and keep everything straight up and down. Then we're going to do the opposite of whatever is being added or subtracted to the x. So it's the number on the right side. They can be rearranged, so remember it's the number that's not attached to x. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. That cancels out on the left side and leaves me with negative 3x. And on the right side, 14 minus 2 is 12. The next step from here is to get rid of that negative 3. That's negative 3 times x. So we do the opposite, which is dividing by negative 3. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 cancels out, and 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. And that's it. You're done. Okay, so that's a 2-step equation. The reason is, remember, you have 2 steps. Step 1 is right here. Step 2 is right here. That's why it's called a 2-step equation. Okay, so we're going to do the other kind of 2-step equation now, which is where you have division problem at the bottom. So instead of 4 times x, this is x divided by 4. And remember, there's a trick to this one, so be careful when you do this problem. So pause it if you'd like to do it all on your own, or just go ahead and let the video roll if you want to go ahead and watch how to do it. All right, just like before, we're going to draw our line right away. We're going to do the opposite of subtraction in 3, which is to add 3 to both sides. Now, my recommendation to you, remember, is to go ahead and rewrite x over 4 as x divided by 4 to help you remember that the opposite is not going to be multiplication, is not going to be division this time. It's going to be multiplication this time. Now we perform multiplication on both sides, and we're going to get x equals 32. So if you did this problem incorrectly, you probably end up with x equals 2, which is where you go ahead and you do this right here, where you have x over 4 equals 8 from right there. And then what you do is you go, oh, okay, I'm going to make these even, so I'm going to go over 4. And it's a very common mistake to make, whereas when you have the division like we put right there, you do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. Okay, now we're going to transition into 3-step equations. Remember that 4 on the outside is very important, and what we did in here is circled it. So go ahead and hit pause if you want to try to do the problem all on your own. If not, play the video and you can watch what happens. All right, so here we go. So we're going to take that number on the outside, we're going to multiply it by both of the numbers on the inside. 4 times 2x is 8x, and 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Okay, we're going to bring down our equal sign on our 4. And now look what we have. We have a 2-step equation. Very important to remember that every single time we're solving an equation, we're always trying to get to a comfortable 2-step equation. Then we know what to do. So now we draw our line, do the opposite of subtracting 12, which is adding 12. That's going to leave me with 8x equals 16. Now it's 8 times x, so we do the opposite of that, which is division. And we end up with x equals 2. Okay, so again, this is what's known as a 3-step equation, because this time we have our first step, our second step, and our third step. A lot of times, though, they just call that a multi. Anything more than 2, they call a multi-step. And the big thing to remember is you want to get to where you have just 2 steps left. Okay, the last example before we move on. We have a multi-step equation here that consists of combining like terms. So go ahead and pause the video, hit play when you're ready, or if you want to just watch it, just go ahead and watch it. All right, starting off here, we're going to combine like terms. The way we did combining like terms in class was we went ahead and put a symbol around them. It's not the only way to do it. That's just the way I showed you guys in class. So we're going to go ahead and group those first. And I'm grouping things that are alike. Now that I have that, I'm going to combine like terms. And a lot of people have trouble with it like this. So what you could do is go ahead and write it as 4x minus 2x plus 3 plus 7. And all I did there was I rearranged the like terms to be next to each other. So now I can just do that, and I can just do that, and that's 2 separate simple problems. So what I end up with is 2x, 4x minus 2x, and 3 plus 7 is 10. Bring down the 24. Now what do we have? Well, a 2-step equation. So at this point, we're just going to follow the steps we know. We're going to go ahead and subtract 10 from both sides, and then divide by 2. And that's it. The problem is solved. What you're going to find, luckily for you guys, just like you did on the multi-step equations, is that you usually don't end up with those division 2-step equation problems because it's very difficult. You have to add fractions and stuff like that. Okay, so what we want to notice here is that what every single one of those examples had in common was that they always had the variables that were on the same side, meaning all the x's were on the left side. And that's important because when you do that, you don't have to do any moving of the x's. All you're doing is combining and adding them up. So here's an example of a problem that's a little bit different. What you'll notice is the variable is on both sides of the equal sign. So if I draw a line in here, I have x's on the left side and I have x's on the right side. A very, very, very common mistake for people to do on these is to combine like terms. You can only combine like terms when they're on the same side of the equal sign. Be very careful about that. If they're on opposite sides like this, you have to do just like you would do with the numbers, and you add one of them or subtract one of them to cancel out. So what we're going to do is we're trying to make this look like a 2-step equation. So when I look at this, I'm thinking, hey, that 2x on the right side shouldn't be there, or at least the 4x shouldn't be there, but one of those x's needs to be gone for it to be a 2-step equation. And like I said before, what we want to focus on is how is this different than a 2-step equation, and what can I do to make it look like a 2-step equation? Okay, so first thing, we're going to start always by moving all x's to one side. And you can see on your notes that you already have the first problem on there. Okay, so 4x minus 6 equals 2x plus 10. Technically, this problem can be done a ton of different ways. You could go ahead and subtract 4x from both sides, or you could go ahead and subtract 2x from both sides. But the key is you need to get rid of either this one or this one. My rule of thumb is, because I don't like dealing with negatives, my rule of thumb is to always get rid of the lower of the two, the lower number. So in this case, you could see the lower number is going to be 2x. But sometimes you got to be careful, because if it's something like negative 10 and 4, a lot of people will think, oh, 4 is lower, but it's not. Think about on the number line. Negative is definitely smaller than a positive number. So you always want the smaller number, the number that's either lower in the case of 4 and 2, or if it's negative, it's definitely lower than a positive number. And what this does for you is all it does really is it gives you a positive x to divide by. So you don't have to worry about negatives as much. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 2x to both sides. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is because 2x is smaller. Okay, so think similarly to how we solve a 2-step equation. After I do that, I'm going to end up with 2x on the left side, because 4 minus 2 is 2. I'm going to end up with negative 6, because I haven't added anything to that yet. those are going to cancel, and that positive 10 is just going to come down. What do I have now? I have a two-step equation. So now what we're going to do is we're going to solve it just like we normally solve two-step equations. So that first step is still just a three-step equation. That first step is to go ahead and get rid of the lower of the two x's. And the reason I want you to think about that is, again, look at the problem originally and ask yourself, how is this different than a two-step equation? It has an extra x. Some people will always get rid of the x on the right side because they want it to look like a normal two-step equation. You can also do that. My rule of thumb, though, like I said, always get rid of the smaller one. Now we're going to add 6 to both sides, which is going to give us 2x equals 16, and then divide by 2 on both sides, which is going to give us x equals 8. So make sure you fill this all the way out in your notes. And as you can see, it's just basically a three-step equation. First step, get rid of the extra x on the other side, and go from there. Really want you to be careful not to combine like terms here. Remember that equal sign means you can only do something on one. You can only combine and organize on one side of it. Okay, now we're on to the second example. As you can see, it's blank, so you're going to have to write the problem down where it says EX2. So I'll give you a second to copy that problem down. And we are going to go ahead and go through the first 3 examples together, just to make sure, because I gave 3 different kind of variations, weird examples, to make sure you understand. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the smaller of the 2 x's. So when I look at these 2 x's, I'm talking about 3x and 7x. Which one of those is smaller? It would be 3. So we're going to do the opposite of that, which is subtract 3. That's going to give me 4 on the right side and a minus 2. And on the left side, the x's are going to cancel. And all I'm going to be left with is 10. Now from here, if you want to, you can then rearrange the problem to look like a common, comfortable two-step equation and then solve it from there. Or you can go ahead and solve it as is, which means we're going to add 2 to both sides. On the right side, it's going to cancel, and we're going to end up with 12 equals 4x. Dividing by 4, we'll get x equals 3. It doesn't matter if it's 3 equals x or x equals 3. It's the same thing. But if that does give you a hard time or that bothers you, like I said, go back to that step and rearrange it when you have something like this happen. But as you can see, we ended up not having to worry about negative x's. All we had to worry about was just a positive x divided by some number. Okay, so now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to move on to the second page of notes, which looks like this. So make sure you have that one in front of you. We're going to start on example 3 on the paper in the top left. And then you can see you're going to do some practice problems together. Okay, so we're on to our last example now, before you guys try some on your own. So what I want you to pay attention to here is that thought of getting rid of the lower of the 2 x's. A lot of times people will want to go ahead and subtract 2x from both sides because 2 is smaller than 3. But 2 is not smaller than negative 3. So remember, if you have one negative and one positive, the negative is always going to be what you're going to get rid of. If you have 2 negatives, you want to get rid of, whichever one's more negative, because more negative means, well, I guess more negative is kind of silly. It's a lower negative. So something like negative 10 versus negative 8, you would get rid of the negative 10. So in this case, we want to get rid of that 3x. Notice that we added 3x to both sides. On all the other ones we subtracted. The reason is we want to cancel out the 3x. So now I'm going to get 5x, 15. The x's are going to cancel. That's the point. You want that to be 0. And negative 5 comes down from above. Now we're at a two-step equation. So we're going to follow our normal two-step equation steps, which is we're going to subtract 15 from both sides and then divide by 5. And we're going to get x equals negative 4. It didn't get rid of the possibility of negatives. We still have to deal with negatives, so be careful on this step right here, because that's where you might make a mistake to get that negative 20. But at least we don't have to divide by a negative, because I know a lot of you guys get confused about, dividing negatives. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do an example on your own. So as always, if you are unable to do it on your own, you can always pause the video. And then just give it a try and then try it again later. So this is number 1. On the paper it says try 1, try 2, all the way up to 5. Before you pause the video though, I want to make sure you do not do one thing. A very, very common thing people do is they try to do all of the steps at once. They say, oh, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go minus 6x, and then I'm also going to go ahead and do minus 9 at the same time. And what they do is they're trying to get this thing done all at once. The problem is what could happen is what I did here, which is not only did I subtract the wrong one, but what I did is I subtracted everything from the left side. So this would cancel and this would cancel, and I'd be left with 0. It's best to really just do one thing first, give yourself a two-step equation, and be comfortable with it. Don't try to do everything in one step. I will be marking those wrong, even if you get the right answer for doing that, because it's a very, very common mistake students make. I understand some of you guys can do stuff in your head and everything, but there's a reason why we do three-step equations with 3 steps. This is basically eliminating one of the steps. And everybody gets confused when it's equal to 0 and they want me to tell them how to do it on a test, and I can't do that. So build good habits now. So go ahead, give that a try, pause the video, hit play after you got the answer. Go ahead and go over this problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and subtract 3x because 3 is less than 6. That's going to leave me with 3x plus 9 equals negative 3. Okay, now I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. And I'm going to get 3x equals negative 12. Dividing by 3 on both sides, I get x equals negative 4. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Still on that same page of notes. Go ahead and pause the video. Give this one a try on your own. Hit play after you think you have your final answer. Alright, so go ahead and get started here. First thing we're going to do is get rid of the lower of the x, which is 4x. That's going to cancel out, and I'm going to be left with 12 equals x plus 2. 5 minus 4 is 1x, so I just wrote it as x, but if you put a 1 in there, that's okay too. Now I need to go ahead and simplify, subtracting 2 from both sides. I'm going to be left with 10 equals x. Just like before, remember, what we can do as well is we can easily check the answer. So for example, if I take that 4 and I plug it in right here, I'm going to get 4 times 10 plus 12 equals 5 times 10 plus 2. So I'm going to get 40 plus 12 equals 50 plus 2. And if you check, those both equal 52. So then we know we have the right answer. So again, remember, that's a great way to make sure your answers are correct. Okay, moving on to number 3 that you're going to try on your own. Go ahead and pause the video. Remember that negative 2 is important on this problem, and hit play when you're done. Alright, so go ahead and starting off here. First thing we have to do is get rid of the lower of the 2. A lot of people might accidentally do minus x here. Remember, you don't want to do that. You can do that, but the easiest way to do the problem is going to be to go ahead and get rid of the lower, which is the negative. We're going to do opposite of it, which is adding. That's going to be gone, and it's going to leave me with 3x plus 10 equals negative 5. Solving that problem from there, you're going to end up with negative 5 for your answer. And again, just raise your hand if you don't understand, the rest of the steps, and I can come over, or Miss Allen can come over and help you out. Okay, moving on to number 4. Both of these are negative, so be careful on which one you add. Again, it will work out either way, but if you want the problem not to have negatives, you have to be careful. So pause the video, give it a try, hit play when you're done. Alright, so in this case, the best way to do it is to get rid of the more negative number, the number that is a further to the left on the number line, which is actually negative 4. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. That's going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with 7 equals x plus 3. It's actually just a one-step equation, and I end up with x equals 4. Again, checking the answer, it'll end up being negative 16 plus 7, which is negative 9. And on the right side, negative 12 plus 3, which is negative 9. That just tells you, hey, yeah, I did it correctly. Okay, moving on to problem number 5. The last one before we kind of put a spin on it. Go ahead and pause the video, give this one a try, hit play when you're done. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of the lower of the 2. Again, be careful here. That ends up being actually the -6, which is going to give us 10x plus 13 equals -7. Subtracting 13 from both sides, you're going to get 10x equals -20. This is a place where I want you to be careful. A lot of times people make mistakes on stuff like that, especially when you're going -7 minus 13 is -20. You owe $7, you borrow 13 more, now you owe 20. Dividing by 10, you get x equals -2. And again, very simple to check the problem, plugging it right back in. Okay, so still in the notes, we're going to look at a fourth example, which is what if there's variables on both sides and it's sort of a multi-step on top of that. So as you can see on the left side, we have what indicates a distributive property problem, and on the right side, we have what indicates a combining like terms problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and first do the distributive property, and I got that 4x plus 4 by taking that and multiplying it by both. 4 times x is 4x, 4 times 1 is 4. On the right side, I'm going to combine like terms, which is going to give me 3x minus 5. So still applying what we learned earlier in the year. Now we have what amounts to an equation with variables on both sides. Be very, very careful not to combine like terms right here. That is, again, the most common mistake. And sometimes it still works out, and then you just will never know you had the wrong answer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of the lower of the two x's, which happens to be 3x. That's going to leave me with x plus 4, and on the right side, -5. Subtracting 4 from both sides on our one-step equation, we get x equals -9. So as you can see, that's just a slight variation using the distributive property and combining like terms. So we're going to go ahead and do a couple more practice problems of those to make sure you guys are comfortable. And then after the video, there'll be an opportunity to do some extra practice. All right, so here's one to try on your own. As you can see, you have distributive property on both sides, so make sure you're careful about that. So pause the video, give it a try. If you're unable to get started, then let me do the first step before you pause it, and then try to go from there. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to distribute on both sides, which is we're going to go ahead and take this 3 and multiply it. And on the right side, we're going to take the 2 and multiply it. So like I said, if you're unable to do the first step or you did it incorrectly, try pausing it right now and just going ahead and solve it from there and make sure you get that part of it. But you are responsible for knowing how to do even the more complicated versions. Okay, so now from here, we're going to go ahead and get rid of the lower of the two x's, which is the 2. That's going to give me 4x minus 6 equals 6. Which allows me then to go ahead and solve the two-step equation. Adding 6 to both sides, I'm going to get 4x equals 12. So therefore, x equals 3. On number 7, I kind of ran out of room on the notes, so what I wanted you guys to do with that one is, go ahead and solve it, but you can go to the right if you need to and make a second row, because I know there wasn't a ton of room in the notes. So looking at number 7, as you can see here, we end up with combining like terms on both sides. You could, of course, do problems that had combining like terms and distributive property. That'd be the most complicated version, but you guys did really well with that in class earlier this year, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just make sure that you follow the steps and do distributive property first. So pause this video. Remember, you need to simplify both sides before you start moving x's. A lot of times I see people trying to do, like minus x plus 2x minus 4x, and it's just very, very confusing when you do that. I mean, what's going on here? There's all kinds of stuff everywhere. How can you even balance that? You can't. You need to first get them neat. Then when you get to a point where you have only one x on each side, then you go through the steps to get rid of it. So pause the video, hit play after you're done, or hit play after I organize the first step if you're unable to do that. All right, so starting off here, I'm going to be combining my 4x and my x, which is going to give me 5x, and then my plus 3. Notice I'm only combining on one side of the equal sign. You cannot combine on both sides, only on one side. Okay, on the right side now, I'm going to combine my x's. And I'm actually using a different shape so that I don't get confused. So now I've got 5x minus 2x, which is 3x, and my minus 7 has nothing to combine. Now I'm at an equation with variables on both sides, and I can go ahead and go through my normal process to solve. So if you haven't done it yet, hit pause and try it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is get rid of the lower of the two x's, which is going to give me 2x plus 3 equals negative 7. Subtracting 3 from both sides, I'm going to end up with 2x equals negative 10. So therefore, dividing by 2, x is going to equal negative 5. Okay, so like I said before, now that we've finished our notes, there is no third page, but what I do want you guys to do is you can do this on scratch paper in your notebook, or scratch paper from me, or if you're at home, scratch paper at home. But I want you to do the little practice quiz. There's just a few example problems to do, just to make sure you can solve equations with variables on both sides. If you look right below the video, there are links to the videos on that quiz. Remember, it's the last 4 of your student ID to get in. And just to make sure you're really comfortable doing these, and tomorrow in class we'll be doing practice of these so we make sure we master it. Otherwise, have a great day.